a company has DevOps up and running, they're actually using the process on a regular basis. What's a common obstacle the companies run into, and most importantly, how do companies get around that? JP, what do you see out there in terms of a possible problem with the process?
The first one is that everyone's trying to make DevOps one size fits all, and that's come up a lot yesterday in discussion, and also with the WSJ piece by Rachel Shannon Solomon. There's this belief that there's a one-size-fits-all DevOps. And yesterday in my talk, I represented that there's most likely going to be a startup DevOps approach, a mid-sized company DevOps approach, and an enterprise DevOps approach, because each one has a different set of attributes with regard to what their function is with regard to the business and what's expected of them. In a startup, your engineering team is your bread and butter. I mean, they are making the product. They are, they're birthing the baby. And then on the enterprise side, this is the engine that runs the company. It's supposed to be very steady state. It's supposed to be very predictable. You want your operations people to be meticulous. You want them to not introduce a lot of risk and a lot of change. And so to approach these two universes identically is one of the fundamental flaws that we see today with regard to DevOps. But the beauty of it is that if we treat DevOps as an approach to gaining agility, and then looking at how each individual organization can absorb and what they can absorb with regard to getting to that end goal, then so if we're approaching the enterprise, the things we need to accept is that they're siloed for a reason. They gain efficiencies and focus through silos. The group that focuses on operating and maintaining the mainframe, and the ones that manage and storage and servers, and the ones that deploy the application infrastructure, they have their focus and they contribute to the overall mission. And the trick is not to come in and to create a cultural revolution and try to get everybody there in that organization to sing Kumbaya and sit at the same table. It doesn't work across a 2,000, 3,000 person IT shop that's spread across multiple contents. But that there are aspects of what we've learned about how to drive agility and how to create a focal point that everybody can contribute to that allows them the same benefits at the end, which is really what we want to achieve from DevOps. I talk a little bit about military analogy. Some of the stuff I learned when working with the DoD, which is that we can, if you look at armies, they're really independent groups of regiments, and they are operated by a overarching mission set by the leading commanding officer, and then each regiment has its own commanding officer that manages inside where the general rules don't apply or context relative to being on the ground. The same thing applies in an enterprise. And if the thing that's missing there, and I think the thing that'll come out through DevOps, is that many organizations don't have a clear mission from the executive officers, the CEO, the CIO, the COO, as to what it is we're doing this year for business, what it is we're involved in, and what we need to achieve. And if you had 3 of those in front of you, pasted on your wall every day, I guarantee you, I don't care if you're the sysop, the sysadmin, a Java developer, you all know what your goals are. And that's not there.
Can I actually jump in there real quick? So I agree with most of what JP just said, except for one thing, that this idea that enterprises are siloed for a good reason. They're siloed because of bad management decisions. It's a decision that was made at a point in time that seemed like the right thing, but it's not the right. I mean, it's using a historical example. Let's look at like GM versus Toyota, right? And that was the same excuse that people used in sort of the anti-lean movement when Toyota was coming and cleaning people's clocks, was this notion that we run this way for a good reason, and we get these efficiencies from doing it this way, and we get all these things that I think if you actually go and walk through their organization, they aren't getting the efficiencies, they aren't getting the control, they aren't getting the stability. I mean, they've got 30, 40 years of history of showing that this is not working. They only move the pace they're going because things are broken, because they're siloed, because of the handoffs they force things to go through, because they've built these organizational structures that basically, the customer cares about a service. They care about whether it's a product being delivered to them or a web service that they're accessing. That's what they see. If you look inside a large siloed enterprise, it looks nothing like that. You've got this dev thing over here, this ops thing over here, this QA thing over here, this security folks, quality assurance, customer service. none of that makes sense to the customer because we're not aligning ourselves to actually deliver value to the customer. They're aligning themselves to fight management battles. They're aligning themselves to sort of have political gain. They're basically they're working. Spend a lot of time working for the organization and the structure, not working for the customer. And I think that's fundamentally something that enterprises, the ones that I think are successfully transforming themselves, are the ones that have faced the facts that this is a management problem. This is a problem that was created by how they designed and drew their world and incentivized their troops, and that that's where the fault lies, and that's a thing that has to be directly addressed if they're ever going to succeed. Otherwise, this idea that we're going to just kind of glom on some tools, or we're going to take the release management people and call them DevOps people and have them fix these problems without fundamentally fixing the management thinking that drew their world in that way, things aren't going to get any different. So
that's I'm glad you're not promoting that DevOps is a silver bullet. It's not, and you've definitely.
I mean, DevOps doesn't really. There is no such thing as. It's not like there's no methodology to it. There's no. DevOps is a collection of ideas. So it's saying that the principles behind what people want out of DevOps. Work in small batches, limit the number of handoffs. Test early and often. There's a long kind of laundry list of things there. Those principles exist for anybody, but how you implement them, there's any number of ways to go about it.
But promoting the fact, but attempting to drive something new like this, or new concepts, with a key component of it being that we need some sort of, and I'll call it cultural revolution, akin to tearing down the silos, right? That's significant. And my only thought on that is that we know what we're dealing with in enterprises, and we need to take a pragmatic approach in order to get them the advantages of agility. And I think that it's like the auto industry, the changes we saw in the auto industry. Once Lean was adopted and we saw successes from Lean, then all of a sudden the organization was ready to take that and embrace it further and implement Six Sigma. But to go in and say we got to tear down the silos in order to succeed, I think is a significant hurdle which will lead to failure.
It's a disaster. You can't ask them to do that. You're telling them, basically destroy the tower in which you live, and the management is not going to go for that. One of the things that DevOps should do, if you're trying to limit those handoffs between the dev guys and the operations, and then down to network and security too. If you look through the rest of the enterprise, if you're trying to limit the handoffs and the difficulties that go on as you're basically passing that app to the next silo, is DevOps should build that bridge and use the interfaces between them and the automation to make it easier for them to start basically building such a big bridge between them that they just become one giant silo and one bigger silo until finally all of the data center is basically one big silo and under one big happy family. But you can't just say you got to start by getting rid of everything that you have now. This should be a way to build.
Actually, hang on, time out. I never said that. I said you need to. What you just said actually, Lori, actually was just what I was talking about. You actually just described a process to break down silos. Silos doesn't mean no silos doesn't mean no groups, right? It's the idea that you have this handoff where you have groups that don't have an aligned point of view, and some piece of work that I have to work on it. And then suddenly I got to hand it over to Andy, who has a different boss, a different set of goals, his own way of being measured, doesn't have the same context that I have. He has to then start taking this thing, re-engineer it, figure out what's going on. And then, lo and behold, the last minute, right before he hands it off to Lori, the ops person, JP, the security guy, shows up and says, "Wait a minute, I need to now actually go through here and scan this thing and see if this is correct or not." Well, guess what? Andy's the QA guy. He's already one step removed from me, who's a developer who was writing this thing. I've already been retasked to another capital project because my time is money. I'm the crucial developer. And then at the end of the day, finally, when if JP signs off, then Lori gets it and hands off and says, "Okay, I'm the ops person. Now I got to figure out what the heck to do with this thing, make this thing run." I mean, that's silos, right? Now, how that would normally work in a sort of non-siloed way is to say, "Hey, well, first of all, let's try to build a cross-functional team as much as possible. Let's try to get myself, Andy, and Lori on the same team. Maybe we can't. Maybe Lori's the infrastructure person. She can't be there all the time. JP's a security guy. There's only 5 of him, and there's 500 developers. Andy's, QA, he's hopelessly outnumbered by developers as well. So maybe we'll have Lori, JP, and Andy build self-service interfaces, build tools that, as a developer, in my group, I may have a representative of the ops team, representative of the QA team. I can now, do all the work I need to do to get this thing to production myself, using the security scanning tools and standards that came from JP, using the testing tools and standards that came from Andy. Yet I write and add my own tests. Maybe Andy maintains a small group of his own that does some sort of specialized testing, and then Lori provides me with the self-service interfaces to order up whatever server images or things that I need. And that way, I've still got 4 groups, probably four different parts of the world, 4 different that were people that were in the old silos, but I've now created a style of working to which there are no more silos, to where information flows through those artifact flows, not from having to do those handoffs. So that's more what I'm talking about. I think if you go in and say, hey, wipe your org chart clean and start from there, that's definitely not what I'm trying to say. Sorry for that long-winded example, but I just want to be clear that when you're attacking silos, it's the siloed thinking, the siloed culture. Right.
I thought it was important to raise as a factor because people could assume that was what is implied, and others have implied, that this is all about a cultural revolution. This is all about a change in the way we do IT. Instead, and reading into that as we have to tear down the walls and rebuild it from scratch, versus we need to rethink, how we're approaching the problem domain, and then look to how we can, fix certain things that we know are hurdles or that impair our ability to have agility, and then drive and fix those. And that's the pragmatic approach here.